Chapter 13, The Watcher in the Woods. While Madam Weatherbury was away, Bristol spent the days practicing magic and the evenings reading the Tales of Tidbit Twitch to her classmates. Although the exercises and reading were productive, she mainly used them as a distraction from her troubling thoughts. After eavesdropping on Madam Weatherbury and the witches, Bristol finally had answers to some of the questions haunting her, but the more she had learned, the more elaborate the mystery had become. Now she understood why Madam Weatherbury had reacted so strongly to the mention of the Northern Kingdom. Something known as the Northern Conflict was destroying the country, and someone the fairy feared was at the center of it. The scaly black letters had been coming from the witches, not to update Madam Weatherbury about a sick friend, but to ask for the fairy's assistance with the conflict. And apparently, if Madam Weatherbury helped the witches end the Northern Conflict, it would ensure worldwide acceptance for the magical community. But what was the Northern Conflict? How would Madam Weatherbury's involvement bring peace to witches and fairies? Who was the woman that Madam Weatherbury was afraid of facing? And the most disturbing question of all, would Madam Weatherbury survive another encounter with her? Bristol's mind never took a full break from the harrowing questions. She desperately wanted to talk to someone else about it, but she didn't know who to turn to. Emeralda and Xanthus wouldn't know any more than she did. Lucy had enough of her own troubles already, and Bristol doubted Mrs. V would be any help. She considered talking to Tangerina and Skylene, but if the girls heard that Bristol was spying on their teacher, Bristol was certain they would tattle on her. So Bristol thought it was best to keep her worries to herself. The concerns weighed heavily on her heart, and the longer Madam Weatherbury stayed away, the more fearful and lonely Bristol felt. On the third evening after Madam Weatherbury's departure, Bristol was a couple of minutes late to dinner. She was in the middle of a very exciting chapter of the Tales of Tidbit Twitch, Volume 3, and quickly finished it before joining her classmates downstairs. As soon as she walked into the dining room, Bristol could tell something was wrong. Tangerina was sitting at the table with her arms crossed, and her cheeks were flushed. Skylene stood behind her friend and rubbed her shoulders. Emeralda and Xanthus sat back in their seats, wide-eyed, like they had just witnessed a spectacle. "What's going on?" Bristol asked the room. "Ask them," Tangerina said and pointed to the others. "Lucy and Tangerina just got into a fight," Emeralda informed her. "It was intense." "A fight about what?" Bristol asked. Lucy walked in and asked Tangerina to stop clogging the bathroom sink with her honey, Xanthus recalled. Tangerina said she was surprised Lucy knew what a bathroom was. Then Lucy suggested Tangerina's personality, not her magic, is the real reason her family abandoned her. And finally, Tangerina told Lucy she doesn't belong at the academy and said she wished the witches had taken her with them. "That's when Lucy burst into tears and ran upstairs," Emeralda said. "Personally, I thought it was all really entertaining until she got upset. It reminded me of the dwarf boxing matches we used to have in the coal mine." Bristol sighed. "Tangerina, why would you say something like that? You know Lucy has been having a difficult time with her magic." "Don't blame me," Tangerina exclaimed. "Lucy started it." "But you didn't have to join her," Bristol reprimanded. "You're an apprentice, remember? You should be more mature than that. I'm going upstairs to check on Lucy. Someone tell Mrs. V I'll be right back." Bristol left the dining room and headed up the floating staircase. She prepared a list of positive and encouraging things to say to Lucy, but in case kind words weren't enough, Bristol waved her wand and made a tray of chocolate cupcakes appear. However, as she reached the third-floor corridor, something very strange caught her eye. The door to Lucy's bedroom had disappeared, and a note had been pinned to the wall in its place. "Dear Madam Weatherbury, thank you for believing in me, but the academy isn't working out. I'm leaving the school and returning to show business. I know my parents' tour dates, so it won't be hard to find them. I wish you and the others the best of luck. XO, Lucy. P.S. Tangerina sucks. Bristol was so alarmed by Lucy's note, she dropped the tray of cupcakes and it shattered on the floor. Without wasting a minute, she waved her wand and made a coat appear over her shoulders and then hurried down the floating staircase. Her classmates had heard the tray drop and peeked into the entrance hall to inspect the shatter. They were surprised to see Bristol heading for the front door in such a panic. "Where's the fire?" Emeralda asked. "It's Lucy," Bristol said. "She's run away." "Oh no!" Xanthus exclaimed. "What do we do?" "You aren't going to do anything," Bristol said. "Madam Weatherbury specifically asked me to look after you guys while she was gone. So I'm going to go get Lucy. You stay here in case Lucy or Madam Weatherbury returns." "You mean you're going into the in-between? At night?" Skylene asked. "You can't leave the academy," Tangerina said. "It's against the rules." "I've got to find Lucy before a horrible monster in the forest does," Bristol said. "She hasn't been gone very long, so it shouldn't be difficult to track her down. I'll be back as soon as I can." Despite her classmates' fearful and frantic pleas to stay, Bristol raced out the door, ran down the castle's front steps, and sprinted across the academy grounds. She reached the edge of the property and waited impatiently while an archway formed in the hedge barrier. Once it finished, Bristol ran through the barrier's leafy tunnel and emerged into the creepy forest behind it. "Lucy," she called into the dark woods. "Lucy, it's Bristol. Where are you?" Bristol looked in every direction for her friend, but she could barely see anything. Eventually, her eyes adjusted to the darkness, but still she saw nothing except crooked trees and jagged boulders. She cautiously moved down the dirt path that snaked through the in-between, jumping at every sound she heard. "Lucy, are you there?" she whispered. "Can you hear me?" With each step, Bristol became more and more frightened of her surroundings. Soon the dirt path split into two different directions, and Bristol had to choose which path to take. Both directions looked almost identical, and Bristol worried she might get lost. To help herself navigate, Bristol waved her wand and made the rocks beside the path glow in the dark, marking the parts of the forest she had already searched. Just as Bristol started to fear she was too late to save her friend, she heard the sound of sniffling in the distance. Bristol followed the sound through the woods and sighed with relief when she finally found Lucy sitting under a tree. Lucy's head was buried in her arms as she cried, and her porcupine suitcase and beaver skull canteen sat on the ground beside her. "Lucy!" Bristol exclaimed. "There you are! I've been looking everywhere." Bristol's voice startled her friend. Lucy jumped to her feet and swung a large stick at her. Bristol dropped to the ground and barely missed getting hit. "Lucy, relax. It's just me. It's Bristol," she said. "What the heck is wrong with you?" Lucy said. "You can't just sneak up on someone like that in a dangerous forest." "Sorry, I didn't realize there was an etiquette to this place," Bristol said. "What are you doing here?" Lucy asked. "I'm looking for you," Bristol said, and got to her feet. "I found the note you left, and I've come to talk some sense into you." "Well, good luck," Lucy grumbled, and threw her stick aside. "I've made up my mind, Bristol. I'm not spending another day in that academy. I knew I didn't belong from the moment I laid eyes on the castle. Madam Weatherbury's lessons have only proved that." "But that's not true," Bristol said. "Our training has just started. You just need more time and practice. Don't let what Tangerina said make you give up on yourself." "Stop trying to make me something I'm not," Lucy yelled. "Face it, Bristol. I'm a witch. I'll never be a fairy like you and the others. And if I keep using my abilities, I'll turn into a monster like Madam Weatherbury's friends. I'd prefer to keep whiskers and scales off my face, so I'm going to stay as far away from magic and witchcraft as possible. I'm leaving, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." Lucy picked up her porcupine suitcase, swung her beaver skull canteen over her shoulder, and proceeded down the path. As Bristol watched Lucy walk away, something inside her changed. All the sympathy she felt for Lucy drained away and was replaced with irritation. She couldn't believe she had risked entering a dangerous forest only to have Lucy turn her back on her. "Lucy Goosey, you listen to me," Bristol ordered. "You're the best friend I have at that academy, and I'm not about to lose you. I've lost too many people in my life to let you wander off like this. Whether you believe it or not, Madame Weatherbury has given us the opportunity of a lifetime, and I will not let you throw it away to play a stupid tambourine with your parents." Lucy was shocked by her remarks. "Stupid tambourine? It's stupid and you know it," Bristol yelled. "You have so much more to offer the world than that. You may not believe in yourself, but I believe in you enough for the both of us. So we are going to march back to that academy right now and continue our training. You're going to stop feeling sorry for yourself. You're going to stop making excuses. And you're going to work as hard as you possibly can to be the fairy I know you can be. And if we find out you're a witch along the way, so what? If you're a witch, then you'll be the best witch there's ever been. You're going to outwitch all the witchiest witches in the world. But I promise you, you will never become a monster on my watch. I'll always be there to keep you in line and stop you from making mistakes. Just like I am right now." Lucy was stunned by Bristol's emotional rant and stared at her as if Bristol was the scariest creature in the woods. "Do you honestly believe everything you just said?" she asked. "I risk my life following you into the in-between. What do you think?" Lucy went quiet as she realized how significant Bristol's gesture was. "Wow," she said. "I don't think anyone's ever believed in me that much, and I have thousands of adoring fans." "So have I convinced you to come back to the academy?" Bristol asked. A sweet grin came to Lucy's face. Apparently, Bristol's tough love was much more effective than any words of encouragement. "Yeah," Lucy said, "I think you have." "Good," Bristol laughed, "because if my rant didn't work, I was about to drag you by the... Pht, pht. Suddenly, they heard a strange sound coming from nearby. Pht, pht. Bristol and Lucy looked around the forest but couldn't find where the noise was coming from. Pht, pht. Something was flying through the air, but it moved too fast for them to catch a clear glimpse of what it was. Pht, pht. Bristol felt a light breeze across her cheek, and 2 arrows hit the tree directly behind her. Pht, pht. Lucy looked down and saw a pair of arrows sticking into her porcupine suitcase. "We're being shot at!" Lucy cried. "By who?" Bristol asked in a panic. In the distance, the girl saw 3 men step out from the darkness. The first man wore a yellow vest and had a rope tied around his waist. The second man wore a red cape and an axe swung from his belt. And the third man wore a green cloak and held a pitchfork. All 3 were dirty and scruffy like they had been in the forest for days, and each of them carried a crossbow that was pointed in Bristol and Lucy's direction. "Well, well, well," the man in yellow said. "It seems to be our lucky day. The Lord has led us to 2 witches in the same spot." "What did I tell you, boys?" the man in red bragged. "The rumors must be true. There's a whole coven of witches somewhere around here." "Sinful scum," the man in green sneered. Did they really think they could live in the woods without anyone noticing? They're practically begging to be hunted down. Bristol and Lucy exchanged a glance of terror and slowly backed away from the men. "They're witch hunters," Bristol whispered, "and they think we're witches." "What should we do?" Lucy whispered back. Bristol's mind went completely blank. Although her wand was securely in her hand, all of Madame Weatherbury's training abandoned her, and there was only one thing she could think of doing. Run! Without a moment to lose, Bristol and Lucy bolted into the forest and ran away from the men as fast as they could. The witch hunters whistled and cheered, excited for a chase, and charged after the girls. The men shot arrows at Bristol and Lucy, but fortunately the thick forest made it difficult to aim. The ground was covered in so many overgrown roots and rocks, it was almost impossible to run without tripping. But Bristol and Lucy moved as swiftly as possible, knowing one misstep could cost them their lives. As they ran, the girls looked back and forth between the men chasing them and the ground ahead. Their escape came to a dead end when they slammed into the flat side of a hill they hadn't seen in the dark. The witch hunters surrounded them, beaming with sinister glee. Obviously, watching their prey tremble in fear was their favorite part of the hunt. "You're awfully young and pretty to be witches," the man in yellow sneered. "That's because we're not witches," Bristol cried. "We're fairies. You're making a terrible mistake." The men howled with laughter like wolves howling at the moon. "Did you hear that, boys?" The man in yellow laughed. "The girl in the sparkling garb says she's not a witch." "Who cares what they are?" the man in red said. "No one in the village will know the difference. We'll be heroes when they see the bodies." "Make sure to aim below their necks," the man in green instructed. "I want to mount their heads on my wall." The witch hunters reloaded their crossbows and raised them at Bristol and Lucy. The girls closed their eyes and held each other in horror, expecting to be pelted with arrows at any moment. Just as the men were about to pull their triggers, they were distracted by something rustling in the trees nearby. Suddenly, a massive creature emerged from the woods and plowed into the witch hunters. The men were knocked to the ground and dropped their weapons. Before they could get to their feet, the mysterious beast plowed into them again, crushing the men's crossbows under its feet. Bristol and Lucy didn't know if they were in more or less danger now that the creature had joined them. It was so large and moved so quickly in the moonlight that Bristol and Lucy could only see one piece of it at a time. They saw horns and hooves, nostrils and teeth, fur and metal, but not enough to determine what they were looking at. "Let's get out of here before we're killed," the man in red shouted. The witch hunters fled into the dark forest, screaming like small children as they went. However, the creature stayed with Bristol and Lucy. It became very still, and all three of them studied one another in total silence. Once her heart rate slowed down and her senses returned, Bristol remembered the magic wand in her hand. She waved it through the air, and dozens of twinkling lights illuminated the forest, and finally the girls saw what kind of creature was standing before them. "Oh my gosh," Bristol gasped. "You don't see that every day," Lucy said. It wasn't just one creature, but two. An enormous knight dressed from head to toe in silver armor sat on the back of a giant horse. A pair of antlers grew out of the knight's helmet, and he wore a long fur cape. The horse had a pitch black hide and a long ebony mane, and to the girls' amazement, the steed had 3 heads instead of 1. Everything about the strange knight and his horse was incredibly frightening, but there was an otherworldly quality about them too. Bristol couldn't explain why, but she trusted the knight, like he was some kind of sacred being. The knight extended an open hand toward the girls. Bristol stepped forward and reached for his hand, but Lucy quickly pulled her back. "Are you nuts?" Lucy said. "Don't go near that thing." "No, it's okay," Bristol assured her. "I think he wants to help us." "How do you know that?" Lucy asked. "He just saved our lives," Bristol said with a shrug. "If he wanted to hurt us, he would have already done it by now." Bristol took the knight's hand and he pulled her aboard his 3-headed horse. He reached toward Lucy next, and after some coaxing, Bristol convinced Lucy to join them. The knight tugged on his horse's reins, and together he and the girls traveled through the dark forest. Soon they returned to the dirt path, and Bristol spotted the academy's hedge barrier in the distance. "How did he know where to take us?" Lucy whispered. "I have no idea," Bristol whispered back. The girls climbed down from the 3-headed horse and looked up at the knight in awe. "Thank you for saving us," Bristol said. "Yeah, and thanks for the lift home," Lucy said. "I'd give you a tip, but I'm out of cash." "What's your name, sir?" Bristol asked. The knight didn't reply, but Bristol didn't take it personally. She had a sneaking suspicion the knight was quiet because he couldn't speak. Well, whoever you are, we're very grateful to you, she said. Just then, a familiar galloping noise sounded through the forest. Bristol and Lucy turned toward the sound and saw Madame Weatherberry's golden carriage traveling toward them. The knight and his horse were so large they blocked the path, and the unicorns came to an abrupt stop behind them. The carriage door flew open, and Madame Weatherberry stepped outside to address the knight. "Horrence?" the fairy asked. "What are you doing here? Is everything all right?" Clearly the fairy and the knight knew each other. He steered his horse toward the side of the path, revealing Bristol and Lucy standing behind him. "Madame Weatherberry!" Bristol cheered. "You're back!" She was overjoyed to see her teacher, but as Bristol walked closer to greet her, Madame Weatherberry seemed very different. The fairy was so exhausted she looked 10 years older than when she'd left. There were bags under her eyes, her dark hair was gray at the temples, and both of her arms were now covered in gloves. Despite Bristol's warm welcome, the fairy was absolutely infuriated to see her students. "What are you two doing outside of the academy?" she yelled. We... Bristol struggled to respond. "It's my fault, Madame Weatherberry," Lucy confessed. "I went outside the property because I thought it would be fun to explore the in-between. Bristol knew it was dangerous and came to find me. We were attacked by the witch hunters, but luckily this weird night guy saved us." "How dare you disrespect me by breaking the rules?" Madame Weatherberry roared. "Both of you get inside the carriage, now." Bristol and Lucy followed her instructions and hopped inside the golden carriage. "Horrence, thank you for your assistance tonight, but I will take it from here," Madame Weatherberry told the knight. The knight bowed to the fairy like she was royalty and then slowly steered his 3-headed horse into the forest and disappeared from sight. Madame Weatherberry joined her students in the carriage and slammed the door behind her. "How could you do this to me, Bristol?" she snapped. "Madame Weatherberry, I told you it was my fault," Lucy said. "But Bristol let it happen," she said. "I trusted you, Bristol. I asked you to look after the others, and you failed me. You have no idea how disappointed I am." Hearing this brought tears to Bristol's eyes. I'm so sorry." "I don't want to hear another word from either of you," the fairy said. "As soon as we get to the castle, you will both go straight to your rooms and stay there until I say so. Is that understood?" Bristol and Lucy nodded and stayed silent. Neither of them had seen their teacher so livid before. They didn't even know the fairy was capable of such anger. It was like Madame Weatherberry had returned to the academy as a completely different person.